Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Michelle White, Associate Curator here at the Menil Collection, and I'm pleased to welcome you tonight. Before we begin, just some basic housekeeping. If you could please turn off your cell phones and also your mobile devices and prevent them from sending or receiving messages. We have some issues sometimes with reception and our speakers. I also, before we begin, want to tell you about an upcoming Menil Collection event. This Friday, March 18th at 4:30 p.m., the museum will celebrate the 50th anniversary of one of the most original and ambitious projects of Dominique and John de Menil. Called The Image of the Black in Western Art, this research and publishing initiative proposed to document every depiction of a person of African ancestry in the art of the West, from ancient Egypt to modern times. A small installation of some of the work that we have from this collection is on view right now in the west pocket to my left. It's a singular story, and we invite you to come learn more. This evening's talk by Kara Walker concludes the third biennial lecture series co-presented by the Menil Collection and the Art History Department at Rice University. Every other year, we jointly present 4 talks, 2 at Rice and 2 here at the Menil, and we present them on a single art-related subject. This year's lecture series is called The Risible Visible, Humor and Art. The 2 Menil Collection talks in the current Menil Rice lecture series, Michael Leja last December and Kara Walker tonight, have been generously funded by HEB. Our thanks to them and for their kind support. Also thanks to Frost Travel for their assistance in bringing Kara Walker here. After the talk, Kara will take a few questions, so if you have anything prepared, get ready, but it will be a short period. And to introduce Kara Walker, I'd like to introduce our director, Joseph Helfenstein.
Good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. First, my thanks to our partners at Rice University, Diane Wolfthal and Gordon Hughes. Thank you also to Carl Killian and Tony Martinez for organizing tonight's program and our Rice lecture series. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Kara Walker to the Menil Collection. Kara Walker is perhaps best known for her startling, subversive, politically satirical, and often controversial large-scale wall tableaus of figures made from cut-out paper silhouettes. Both tragic and comic, they draw from the folklore of the antebellum South and fearlessly tackle taboo issues of gender and race. As such, they pose provocative questions about the representation of the history of slavery and racism in the United States and beyond. Mrs. Walker is currently a professor of art at Columbia University. In 1997, she became the youngest recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship, and in 2007, she was among Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Quite an achievement. She has had major exhibitions internationally and here in the US, among others, at the Walker Art Center, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and as I said, in many, many other places. We are very, very pleased she can be here with us tonight at the Menil. Please help me in welcoming Kara Walker.
Good evening. Thank you. Hi, good evening. This is my first trip to Houston, and I've been here for minutes or a couple of hours, so I apologize for not knowing enough about the city. let's see if I can nervously begin. I just titled this The Art of Kara Walker in the Age of Race Fatigue, mainly because it amuses me, not necessarily because we're tired of talking about race. Although I think at the moment that I composed that, I might have been. This image, Sunglass, was a gift from someone when I was about 20. And a little background, I went to the Atlanta College of Art and got my BFA there. And I'm not originally from Atlanta, but my family and I moved there when I was 13 from California. And some of my experiences in adolescence kind of coincided with an awareness, I guess, of what the idea, let's say the idea culturally of a black girl is, not necessarily the felt lived experience. So part of the project that I found myself embarking on from about, say, the age 20, 21 in the early 90s was trying to kind of get to some understanding. This is sort of the moment of identity politics and art. And there was a part of me that, because I grew up in a household with art, my father's a painter, and I lived in and among art exhibits where, through the 60s and 70s, there was quite a bit of work coming through my life that was exploring black identity issues about slavery, oppression, social issues, the war, Vietnam War, things like that were prevalent. But I think in my experience, kind of trying to get to some place where I recognized my own peculiarities, my own maybe failings in my effort to sort of truly be a strong black woman. What I'm trying to say is my failings were exemplified in this postcard and the receipt of it. What I guess wanted to say by putting this up here first was that seeing this image for me wasn't just a kind of startling recognition of the kind of supplication of like black female girlishness to some larger, more nefarious white patriarchy. I started to kind of try and look at this image as, as many things. I guess it's like a setup, like it's a stage for many possible interpretations. And one of the interpretations, the one that I wanted to have the most, was that she, in that moment, that this picture, changed, the actual girl into a representation of a girl, that this act was, that the fiction was recognized, let's say, that the act of posing and the act of being sort of made or remade by, presumably male, presumably white eyes for a presumably white audience was something that she might have been, in my wishful thinking, aware of and able to kind of get square with, maybe not control, but maybe in a kind of passive resistance way, be okay with. And was I okay with that, was the question. So I started, let's see, I'm going to go forward. Part of the too many slides that I have here, I have a range of practices in my studio. There's drawing, some kind of efforts at writing, and the cut paper pieces. So drawing sometimes constitutes small paintings or large paintings with gouache, liquid mediums. And all of those ways of working sort of, there were sort of recurring threads. There's writings that lead to drawings that lead to cut paper pieces, and then sometimes there are writings that negate the larger work, that try and kind of examine or critique what it is I've been doing or who it is I think that I am. So I have an assortment of work like that tonight. But I got to this place of sort of trying to examine identity and race and my place in it by trying to undo painting. I thought, my experience in the world, or the way I experience the world, is through art, I guess. And I didn't see myself as adequately rebellious or adequately politically engaged, or at least many of my colleagues at the Atlanta College of Art didn't see me as adequately rebellious or politically engaged. And I wanted to take a look at that, this kind of way of being in the world that was distressingly kind of passive and laudatory towards like the art, like in particular Western art. So I'm sorry I'm rambling a little bit, but I'll get my footing soon enough. One of the things that's kind of interesting being here that I didn't actually realize before I got here was that the image of the black in Western art sort of originated with the Menil Foundation. And that was a seminal sort of text in my early 20s. I guess I came across a couple of volumes in the bookstore that I was working at in Atlanta. And I thought, well, this is exactly what I'm, trying to get to. Is like trying to understand my black body, my black femininity through as it's been interpreted. Because one of the, I think, stumbling blocks that made me such a sort of passive and less than politically engaged or less than adequately politically engaged young woman, was this kind of belief, maybe, in Western art. When I started making the cutouts, it was kind of a direct attempt to undermine what it is I believed in painting from a previous moment in my life. And I can maybe speak about that more if people have questions, but this is the first large cut paper work that I made, and originally it was at the Drawing Center in New York. It was my first show, my first real big show in 1994, and I just graduated from Rhode Island School of Design and with my MFA, and really hadn't worked this large prior to that. I didn't have the kind of space, but I knew that I could do it. So I had been cutting out these silhouettes. I'm going to have to speed through because I'm like at this other sort of Texan tempo over here, and I got like 80,000 slides over here. And I'm like, how can I get through these and find my words at the same time? So let me go forward a little bit. So from about 1994, pretty much through now, but with some breaks and switches, I've been making these cutouts. This is a detail from a piece that has an extremely long name that changes every time it's shown, so I won't bother to tell you. But the first piece was called Gone, an historical romance of a civil war as it occurred between the dusky thighs of one young negress and her heart. And it was a little bit of autobiography, a little bit of Gone with the Wind, a little bit of romance novel, a lot of slapstick, and it was made pretty much over maybe a week or a little less than a week because there was a water main break in the gallery. So, so it was kind of a cathartic effort. So moving ahead, most of the work sort of in the 90s I kind of felt was occupying the same space, that if I were thinking filmically, which I wasn't at the time, that first tableau would have been sort of the setup, and then each subsequent cut piece would kind of be another chapter or narrative within that landscape. This is from a piece called Africant. Another detail. This is The End of Uncle Tom and the Grand Allegorical Tableau of Ava in Heaven. The title from that was actually taken from Broadside. I believe it was reprinted in The Image of the Black and Western Art, but it might have been another text that I was looking at the time. And it was a broadside advertisement from the 19th century of production of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And the last sort of, chapter, tableau, act was the Grand Allegorical Tableau of Ava in Heaven. And I sort of got interested in, these kinds of narratives that live in our popular consciousness and pop culture, where the lives of, Black people, the lives of Black characters are kind of situated at the margins of the white characters who, either exploit or exploit them, let's just say. This is a detail from a piece that I made that was a sort of a cyclorama. I think I did write the title down at this point, but we don't really need to bother with it. It's Slavery, Slavery, we just call it. And it most of the joke with the titles that I've given the work has to do with, there's a little bit of self-referential giddiness, and I kind of like the idea that the museum has to kind of maybe lower itself to speaking to an audience that maybe would not anticipate seeing work by a Black girl. So I sort of position myself as the negress, some other character who's created this work from some other time, and sort of riffing on some of the kinds of testimonials that were given by, upstanding white citizens to, texts like, what's her name? The poet? Phyllis Wheatley, thank you. Good. We're all up on our Black history. You should all be better than me. And other texts like that, that anytime a Black person found themselves literate, they had to sort of be vouched for, proven to be intelligent. So I do that for myself with most of my titles. This is another view of Slavery, Slavery, and the last view. One of the reasons I started cutting instead of painting was to sort of deny my own hand, to sort of take away the sort of expressive quality that painters sometimes can't control. I'm sorry, this is a bad image. It's from a slide. It's a scan of a slide. But this is a little better. This is from, I think, 2000 or 2002. Excavated from the heart of a negress. It's black paper on a black wall, black and white paper on a black wall, and it looks gray here, but that's really just the lighting. It's as you kind of move through the piece, this sort of are meant to disappear, more or less. So. I'm sorry? To finish this piece? I think I worked on that one for maybe, I don't know. I could say about a week, but there were other pieces in the show. This was about 80 feet long in total. I don't think I have the complete image. Oh, there it is. So this is the studio practice part. So I'm working on these large-scale installations and traveling a lot. I had a lot of early success, which meant me just saying yes to everything. And at a certain point, I kind of took myself back a little bit and started doing two things. I started typing at home, and one of the first, typing on little note cards, 3x5 note cards. And it was part of, I considered it a part of my drawing practice, but just with words and kind of listening to the voices in my head, I guess, for lack of a better term. And one of the first sort of things that I heard was maybe it's time to do away with images that engage our pleasure centers before trying to destroy them. So I thought I would just try and type for a little while without making pictures, because I had worried, and maybe it's evidenced by how quickly or slowly I move through the cut paper works, that there was a certain reception that I was getting that I felt like the work, although giddily violent and sexed up, it was maybe getting too easily read, and I don't know if that was from the audience or if that was me. So I did a bunch of typings, and then I sat down and made these very small gouache paintings with little cutouts of tissue paper. They're sort of fragile and sort of dumb, and I just considered them primitives, like they were my primitive work. Like I was trying to teach myself how to paint or how to make pictures again. And each one was, in a way, its own little poem. That was called Familiar. That one's called The Entrance to the Underground Railroad. And that's Gettysburg Battlefield Part 2. That's Gettysburg Battlefield Part 1. And really they're like 6 inches. That's the Two Competing Suns and the Imposter. And these are some of the typed cards that I was doing. And I could spare you. You can try and read them if you'd like, but they sort of became a series. And so a handful of them I presented alongside the smaller paintings, just to kind of prove that I had been working. And in fact, some of the text cards were just images clipped from other sources. And I think part of my project early on, when I started graduate school, was to try and understand my art, myself, maybe history, but always sort of with an eye towards anything black and preferably female, which meant that I could misread or reinterpret all pictures any way I wanted to through my particular black and female gaze. This piece was originally shown in Basel at the Bialev Foundation. I was asked to do a piece, not exactly a commission, but for a show that was called Ornament and Abstraction. And basically, the curator wanted me to try and respond to the African works in the collection, or some common. What the collection has is European, early modern primitive masters and works by unknown artists from Africa and Oceania and other places. And so I did this kind of riff on a Matisse. It's not evident to anybody except for the Matisse that was on the other side of the room, and Josephine Baker, and this kind of Euro fetishism of the African, or at least maybe not fetishism, but yeah, fetishism, the collecting body. So I knew about the history of silhouettes, but only through gradual sort of learning. When I started cutting things out, it wasn't an easy step. It kind of looks really simple, but I was thinking about, how to not make paintings, how to think about my relationship to painting, and I sort of thought of myself as sort of, in a second-class position to a particular strain of Western modern painting. And so I started looking at, works that were by women, works that were by, people who were not considered people, works and types of art, forms of artwork that weren't considered fine art. So silhouettes sort of came up time and time again. There's a connection to all kinds of pseudosciences and physiognomy, and there's a lot of sort of information sort of packed into this blank space. That's the cutout. But in addition to all of that, there's a kind of animated quality that, there's shadow puppet theater that's been around for ages, and shadow puppet movies, films in the early cinema era, including those by Lotte Reiniger and others in the silent era. So I kind of knew that film might be a direction that I could go if I wanted to move laterally and keep working with the silhouettes, but I didn't know how to make film because I have a painting and printmaking background. And I didn't trust film. It's not so much I didn't think I could pick up a camera, I just didn't trust that anything would happen. So I started doing these projection pieces. There are a few of them. This is the last one I did. It's called, what's it called? Somebody? Anybody? Scholars. It's Darkytown Rebellion. And it sort of followed those small little dorky pieces I was showing you earlier, so this sort of came after that. And I just wanted to push light through something and have something solid and something sort of particulate, interfacing with one another before I could actually sit down and just make a film. So the first one was a Super 8, very short, kind of revenge fantasy that goes wrong, called Testimony. And, it's intentionally crude. It's as crude as it was going to be, and not much, it's hand done. I never wanted to sort of create the sort of illusion that, it's a cartoon without a maker, that, I'm in the background of most of it. And I'm really kind of interested in that, in that sort of screen, reveal situation where, you're caught up for a moment in the narrative and then implicated at the same time. I think that, with the way that I position myself with my work relative to the titles and, just, some of the choices that I make for things to show or not show, I'm implicated across the board, and I'm interested in that kind of relationship to an audience that, that an artwork can create. The second film was called 8 Possible Beginnings, or The History of African America. And there's 8 short vignettes that really I wanted to make a creation story based on all the creation stories that we sort of know or tell ourselves about, what it is to be African Americans. Although, as with any story, it's also, again, about the storyteller and the act of storytelling. So there are moments that are sort of recognizable, like the slave ship, but then there's a kind of mythic, motherland that swallows everybody. There's, defecation and a man created from that pile. There's a male giving birth to a thing that might be a big cotton plant, and then there's Walt Disney. And part of the sort of, mega story around that was that I made that piece for a show that was at the Roy and Edna Disney CalArts Theater Gallery in Los Angeles. And although risky, needed to have a little bit of an Uncle Remus conversation. So these are clips from that. And that's us working. Moving ahead, moving right along. This is kind of a side project that really made me very happy and proud, but it hasn't really been repeated. This is 2006. well, 2005, actually I think 2004, I was asked by Gary Tintereau at the Metropolitan Museum of Art if I would put together some kind of, or if I would be interested in having a show in this small space in the contemporary wing of the museum. And I said, I guess, but I felt kind of, I don't know, there's this kind of thing that can take over you or sometimes where you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be at the Met, and, if I'm going to be at the Met, I should be in a big room. But if I'm going to do something in the Met, well, doesn't it seem like I kind of rented out the space? I mean, am I going to make something new for the Met, or, some money involved? So anyway, so I just kind of forgot about it, basically, for a while, and did other projects, other places, made new work. And then this thing happened where, while I was showing that 8 Possible Beginnings film in Los Angeles, New Orleans got destroyed, and night after night, like for the first time in a really long time, all of America had to confront race and infrastructure and poverty and racism, and it was all there, and I was really struck, as we all were, I guess, partially by the images that were coming out, but also just the sort of, I want to say paradox of, trying to, what I wanted really was to stay present to the disaster and sort of do something, but at the same time sort of caught up in the news cycle, which is like a different sort of mode where you're sort of constantly feeding on the disaster, so you're not doing anything. In order to sort of break the cycle in a way, and also sort of falling back on my weak point, which is being an artist, I decided to use that space that I had forgotten about at the Met and just try and curate a show that, included some of my work because that's what they had asked for, but also included work from the Met, and try and create a story that maybe captured the, in a complicated way, because it's not, it's not news that I'm making art, that captured the kind of combination of, Black in America, water, and disaster. There's Middle Passage, there's Hurricane Katrina, there's, segregated swimming pools, there's my inability to swim, there's all of this kind of stuff that's related. So the show kind of weaves a little bit of a story without a lot of words about sort of migrations and drownings and disasters, and it's not strictly it's not strictly images of African Americans, but I tried to get as many as I could in there. And so anyway, I'm just showing too many images because I'm proud of it. I moved into working with video recently. It's faster than film, easier to, you don't have to find some place to process it and or ruin it, which I discovered is one of the hazards of working in film these days, if you're not an expert. So, just a quick look. It's a film that doesn't have a specific sort of literary sort of base, except a little bit. It's a little tiny bit of an Oedipus tale with a boy and a mother-like figure. And more recently, and this is another of these moments where I started to doubt the efficacy of pictures, I enlarged the typing and made these posters. And I'll show you a couple of quick details. They're really not much to behold, but they're awful to me. And I consider them paintings, and the effort over, a week or so that I was working on them intensively was to have the paper, have the liquid medium, say the paint, and to sort of basically what I was thinking at the time was that art is a crime, and every time I sort of commit a sort of an act on that blank space, it's kind of an act of violence. And I was thinking actually about abstraction at the time, so these are my abstract paintings. Trying to draw a black man without the specifics of nationality or price. To look at him is to commit the crime of policing. Floodlights revel in the fantastic construction. And just to counter that, I made highly decorative paintings out of cut paper. I am constantly contradicting myself. This is a segregated cut paper piece. And concurrent with that work was another group of very, very fast cutouts, and small, and each one of these had its impetus from a text taken from the Freedmen's Bureau. So I was looking at some lists and things that have been compiled online, and some things that I had ordered from the National Archives. There's just like these amazing tallies of atrocities committed against blacks by whites, these sort of racial crimes in the Reconstruction, Jim Crow era, actually more post-Civil War, from the records of the Freedmen's Bureau. And each one of them, kind of had there was a sort of specific poetry to it. It was like an unidentified kind of Negro, but a Negro, hung by a vine in such and such a place. And so each one, sort of delimited a place and an entity, not necessarily a full human, but an entity and an act. And so these little cut sculptures sort of followed that in a way. Then each one of these, I guess, acts, the drawings and the typings, the writing, and these small sculptural pieces are kind of ways to, part of it is, studio practice, finding my footing, trying to get square with where, what I'm interested in, what's happening to me, what comes next. Most of the time there's a sort of a tie-in, like I'm thinking I'm going to do something very large following this. And in fact, when I made these little sculptures, I was thinking that they were a storyboard for a film. And in fact, I set out to do a storyboard for a film, and then I couldn't do the storyboard for the film because I just wanted the things to move right there. I just wanted to have like a piece that, could be seen sort of in 1, 2, 3. There might still be a storyboard, but video again, following the Freedmen's Bureau investigation, which is, I'm like an amateur historian. I'm not going to pretend to be a really good researcher, but I am kind of interested in that sort of project of getting the facts. And part of the reason I'm interested in the project of getting the facts is because so much of what art is like telling the lie. It's like, I got all the facts, and now I'm going to make a puppet show, and that's what I do. And it's kind of, I'm trying to find that fine line between where the reality kind of catches you off kilter, and where the falseness, or where the stagecraft, or where the light-hearted quality maybe also kind of sideswipes you, me, us. So this is a still from this video. This is also a still from the video called 6 Miles from Springfield on the Franklin Road. And all that was a small sentence taken from a testimony given by a girl named Amanda Willis in Springfield, Tennessee. And this testimony, it's really a sentence long, and I kind of elaborate. And part two, it's not really part two, but some of the same puppets appear, is from a completely different location in Tennessee. It's called Lucy of Pulaski, and it was I was trying anyway to kind of interpret this extremely long-winded document from the Freedmen's Bureau where a race riot occurred, but the cause of it seems to have been this very irritatingly soap operatic love triangle. And so, there's nothing kind of more disheartening and more, humanizing than reading something like a historic tragedy that's caused by, some crime of passion. Maybe not a crime of passion, but simply passion. And this is a studio shot of me and too many people behind the very small screen having a riot. Oops. We're getting there. Okay. This is a little bit more recent in following the written pieces. And I'm sort of, at this point, this is post my mid-career retrospective. It was a survey show that happened in 2007. It started at the Walker. It was down at the Fort Worth Museum. I think that was its last stop. And there's nothing worse, I think, than having, I don't know, there's nothing worse. It's not that bad. It's pretty great having I'm just going to backtrack all the way to, it was fucking amazing having a mid-career retrospective at, 37, and then you think, oh, okay, so this is halfway through, and I'm not quite there yet. So, on the one hand, I got this chance to sort of take stock on, 15 years of work, and then question, well, what am I going to do now? So a lot of the texts, poster pieces kind of were percolating or growing out of that anxiety, and these paintings, which are, capitalizing on those abstract text pieces, continue that. So this is, I think, from the show I had at the gallery 2 years ago. This is a Sycamore Jenkins Gallery in New York. Where I've been showing for my whole life so far. And I have since stopped making these, so at least for now. So what I'm up to now, many things, but I have a series of prints that were just published and apparently are all gone, but I'm very happy with them. They're, let's see, Dry Point with Aquatint and Spit Bite and some other cool stuff if you're into printmaking. And there's 6 of them in the series. I just put a few of them here. It's called An Unpeopled Land in Uncharted Waters. And I was just kind of looking at some of my printmaking heroes like Goya and Rembrandt, best I can. And more recently, I did a cut paper piece with the inclusion of watercolors for a show on Huckleberry Finn. That was at the Wattis Institute in September of this year. And those watercolors are sitting on top of and next to and all around the cut paper works. And riffing on Huckleberry Finn, I was just feeling very, I don't know if I was feeling so much subversive as flippant, because over the years I've just never really managed to do a Huckleberry Finn piece until I was asked to be in a Huckleberry Finn themed show, and then I was like, Huckleberry Finn. I quite like Mark Twain, though. He's a friend of mine, but what I was thinking about Huckleberry Finn was really this kind of. I felt like I had done my literary reference pieces in the mid-90s, and had sort of stopped doing literary reference pieces. And in order to do Huckleberry Finn, I couldn't sort of just stick with the text. So Huckleberry Finn, in my mind, is, paired up with Topsy from Uncle Tom's Cabin, who, is an equally free and wicked spirit, but she's been tamed by her author, who, is trying to, has a moral agenda. And I was also kind of interested in the young male love object in A Death in Venice, as the sort of, instigator for all of this Huckleberry Finn mania in San Francisco. And now, this is a bad shot from the studio, and it's a teaser, so you have to go to New York in April to find out what that's all about. But I've got 2 shows coming up and 2 different bodies of work. Drawings, fairly large, a few small, and the drawings are going to be in one show, and they're sort of focusing on maybe the let's see, where are we in the world? The sort of migratory position of African Americans. Let's say African American is a term applying to a people who are always in flux, always sort of moving from one state to another, from rural to urban, or something like that. And the video that I've been working on, which I don't have images of, unfortunately, I'm literally like in the thick of it, is going to be shown at another gallery in New York at the same time, which is a very bizarre kind of new world order. But I think I chose that, and I keep dismissing it because it seems too big. But anyway, the video is a narrative. It's called Miss Pippi's Blue Tale, and it moves back and forth between a tale of lust and a kind of foreboding, maybe even slightly surrealist backdrop. And that was 83 slides and a lot of hesitation and pauses. But I'm really, really, really open to having a question because I know I didn't answer anything at this point. So. But I can only take a few. Anybody?
When you do these pieces in like in a week, which is like amazing, do you have like a plan, or how much improvising goes that you're doing?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, it's a little structured improv. I usually have a couple of pieces cut already. I mean, the Huckleberry Finn piece, I had kind of privately had sworn off doing another large-scale cut paper piece after that survey show, only because it was, I don't know why. But there was no reason, so I say a week, like the actual cutting and making, it's basically a week, but there's a process before that involves these kind of like drawings and, maybe reading. In the Huckleberry Finn case, I reread Huckleberry Finn, and, I sort of started drawing, and then part of the problem with the drawing, and that's a couple other extra weeks of, getting through the muck in the foreground, because there's all your daily activity, and then there's your sort of personality disorder, and, there's all this stuff to sort of push out of the way, and then, like try and hold on to that little beam that represents, the thing you're supposed to be focusing on. And then, a few days later, I'll get the black paper up and start cutting. I'll have like 3 anchor images. Like, I was really clear on like the Topsy and Huck thing and the Death and Venice thing. And so I just wanted to have some of that kind of lust there, and then things just sort of flow after that, usually. Oh my God, it's a lot of images, I lost a lot of hands. Okay, hold on, I'll go here and then we'll go back there. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, both. I was working with Gregory Burnett in New York, who's amazing, and really it was a collaboration. I mean, he's a master printer, so he does the heavy lifting, and he puts the plates in the acid. But most of the time, I actually went there initially because I was supposed to, make a piece for, like a multiple for a benefit for another organization. So I worked with him once, and he was really cool. And what happened was he gave me this roll of paper, and his studio's close to mine, so I wasn't in my space anymore, so I could just draw, and it was so liberating to not be in my, so you're already in your headspace, and then you're in your own studio space. It's too much. So, so it was a real collaboration. So I drew everything on. It's dry point, so it's straight on the plate. And yeah, we worked it out, and it just kept growing and growing. So I mean, the whole piece takes up 9 feet of wall in the end, but separate sections. It's ridiculous. Okay, thanks. Okay, somebody here, and then somebody back there.
How would you describe your color palette?
My color palette? I have never been asked that. No, because I put painting so far away in some ways. Even when I use watercolor and paint, I tend not to think that I'm actually painting, so that I don't have to deal with painting issues like color and juiciness and stuff. So why do you ask?
Because it seems muted relative to some of the vividness of the drawing.
The cutouts, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I think for the most part with the watercolors and the other times that I use color, I mean, most of the color that I've been using is in the videos, and the videos are maybe not here so much, but they're fairly, I think they're fairly bright. But I think it's mostly dependent on how crummy my watercolors are, which, with the exception of those last text pieces, those are pretty. I thought they were pretty vivid, actually. I will think about it. And you're back there in Adidas.
I guess it follows up on that a little bit. You mentioned earlier about having a resistance to painting. You might talk about that.
Oh, my resistance to painting? Well, my whole mythology around painting has to do with, it's not even a mythology, it's kind of real. It has to do with, my relationship to, say, white Western patriarchy, and what it was doing for me or what it wasn't. So it was like an act of resistance in a way to kind of take a step back and think, well, am I just trying to be like the mistress to the whole history of painting? And if so, what does that look like? So and from that, I guess this whole body of work really, with the cutouts mostly followed. It's not so much that I reject it or can't really do it, but it sort of was a position that I took. Yeah. Well, I mean, I sort of like where I landed. I mean, I do feel like when I was painting, some of the problems that I have with painting, I just do right off the bat. Like there's a big figure right in the middle. It's like I assume it's they're deeply allegorical and too they sort of lack humor. So, I mean, for some reason, I was also painting in undergrad and somewhat at the beginning of graduate school, or as large as I could, which was unwieldy. So, if you've got like a little car and no space, and to make a 12 by 9 foot painting, it looks great for a moment, but then you have to like, roll it up. And so I didn't like the whole sort of like the romance and mechanics around painting. I kind of wanted to step back and be a little crude. Okay, I can do like two more. Okay, you're up with a mic.
My name is Tony McMillan, and I was just wondering, how do you price your work?
Well, like I said, I've been showing with the same gallery for 16-something years, and I basically let them do it. I never really thought about it when the first large piece that I made it was a show called Selections, and they would take like 4 artists from their art slide registry and put together a show. So I really didn't think anything beyond putting up that show, taking it down at the end, rolling it up, or putting it in some kind of portfolio and taking it home. And the first time that Brent, who I've been showing with, came, I wasn't living in New York at the time, he came to Providence, and he said, I think we could get this in a good collection. And I was like, what does that even mean? It sort of, so what I'm doing is I'm stalling and hedging because I don't have an answer for you, but the work, how that gets priced, happens out in the marketplace, and I think for better or for worse, I've tried to kind of like focus most of my attention in the studio. I know there are other artists who are much more kind of business-minded about it, and you do have to be careful to not get screwed by people, but I said 2 more, so I'm gonna take Rick's, and then, I'm not gonna take Rick's. You can talk to me later. Look at this, everybody's like, Okay, I'll do 2 more. I'll do you, and then I'll do you. Okay. Were you the being pointed to? Yes. Okay.
Do you see yourself continuing to plumb the depths of this slavery that chapter?
Well, it's not so much in slavery. I think the first body of work was really situated in a sort of antebellum narrative, and it's drifted pretty, maybe stealthily away from that in a lot of ways. But I think it still gets characterized as located in slavery because they're black-looking faces or black-looking profiles. But right now, when I started working in film, I said, well, I think I've entered, the early 20th century, structurally. So, the last body of work, the drawings that I was talking about, I'm sort of, at least, I think I'm locating them in the sort of pre-early jazz era. I'm still thinking about how blackness comes to be defined, from within, from without, what transformative kind of, how the body sort of transforms. I'm sort of interested in power relationships, and slavery was the catch-all for talking about power, and and talking about our kind of reliance on sort of dubious power structures in order to sort of feel stable. So, okay, this is the last one, and then I gotta stop. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could collaborate with any artist or today, who would you just like to, or if you even would be interested in anything, like a big group of that.
Right. Collaboration.
Can you repeat, Karen?
The question was about what contemporary artist I would most like to collaborate with if I would today in some kind of situation. And I immediately got defensive inside of me. I was like, collaboration is like, collaboration's impossible. I mean, I feel like there's a willed or desired answer, and yet I don't. There are funny things that happen. This is not an answer exactly again, but when I was channeling Fred Wilson doing the Met piece, and I was also asking for his forgiveness privately. Because his mining the museum and his efforts at sort of taking a look at how museums, or how we envision ourselves through objects, was really informative and transformative. I also find myself paying homage to Glenn Ligon, who has an amazing show up at the Whitney right now, for using text and the way that he has used it, so. Poetically and painterly and rich. And so I also, in a couple of pieces right now, have been doing my silent prayers to an homage to Glenn. But I couldn't sort of imagine a collaboration in the maybe true proper sense, where we're sort of in the room working together, or sharing ideas back and forth. Although we may talk and share ideas in a more sort of oblique, human way, but not as forced or coerced. So my answer is kind of, I don't know that I could collaborate, but I definitely, hold some artists dear and sort of respond to them, and so there we go. I think that's it.